In this video, I'm going to walk you through a strategy that I like to use when I have to write summaries. Remember that a summary is a reduction, which means that you're removing all of the examples and explanations and beautiful writing and taking something that's long and complex and reducing it down to just the main ideas. And since most essays follow the basic rules that I've been teaching you in O98, you can use some of that understanding as a strategy to begin your process of writing your summary. So remember that just about every paragraph you read is going to have a topic sentence, and then that's usually the first sentence of the paragraph. And that in the topic sentence, the author is telling you what the paragraph will be about and what the paragraph might be trying to argue or convince you of. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've highlighted the first sentence of the paragraphs that are in this essay that I know you've already read, what happiness is. So then what you want to do is make sure that you understand what the topic sentences are saying. So if at any point you come across one and you think, I don't really know what you're talking about, which I think happens in paragraph 3, I was a little bit confused about that, then you can look at the rest of the paragraph because this author, Eduardo Porter, has done a really nice job of explaining what each of these ideas means using illustrations, examples, quotations, etc. So I think that this essay is really interesting because the title says that it's what happiness is, which makes me think, oh, you're going to tell me what happiness is. But then immediately Porter says, happiness is a slippery concept. So when something's slippery, it means you try to grab it, and by grabbing it, it kind of slips right out of your hand, right? Well, if you were to think about that metaphorically as representing the definition of happiness, he's saying you can't grab and hold on to a definition of happiness, right? It's a bundle of meanings. In other words, you can't just say happiness means this one thing. It means a lot of different things. And it has no precise stable definition. So stable in this case means unchanging. So happiness, you can't grab onto it. It means a lot of different things, and its meaning kind of shifts and changes with time and context, okay? So if I wasn't sure about that, I could look at the rest of this paragraph and see that the author gives us quotes from Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, and Snoopy and Peanuts. And in fact, these 3 quotes illustrate this idea that to different people, happiness means different things. And in fact, for Snoopy, he doesn't even know why he's happy. So, he can't even begin to answer the question, even though he is happy. In the next paragraph, we have what I think is essentially the thesis statement. So if you were writing this essay and I were saying to you, I really need you to follow my rules for how to write an essay, you would actually put this last sentence at the end of this opening paragraph, because then the thesis statement, which is this, would be at the end of your intro paragraph. Now, Porter's made a different decision, and that's fine. He's decided that his thesis feels so important that he's going to set it aside and make it its own sentence. So let's take a look at it. Most psychologists and economists, so those are the 2 frameworks we're going to use. Psychology, which is like the study of why people feel or think the way that they do, and economists, which are people who understand the way that money and finance and the economy work. So these 2 groups of specialized researchers who study happiness agree that what they prefer to call subjective well-being. So in other words, if you ask a psychologist, what's happiness? The psychologist would say, well, I call that subjective well-being. And subjective has to do with how you experience something yourself. So in other words, how you experience or understand your own feeling of okayness. And they say that this feeling, what we call happiness and what they call subjective well-being, has 3 parts. So we know this is an analysis paper because the author, Porter, is breaking down happiness into 3 parts. The first part is satisfaction, and then notice here, meant to capture how people judge their lives measured up against their aspirations. That's the definition of satisfaction. Positive feelings like joy. So in this case, he doesn't give a definition, he gives an example, because I think we all know what joy feels like. And then the absence of negative feelings like anger. So in other words, what Porter is saying people understand happiness to be, at least within psychology and economics, is that you're satisfied with how you're doing, you feel good feelings, and you don't feel bad feelings. Let's look at 2 more paragraphs, okay? So here's the next topic sentence really is it does not exist, but that's pretty short. So I went ahead and added the next one. It does exist. It relates directly to objective measures of people's quality of life. So I think, I don't know what this means, right? So in this case, I'm going to look at the rest of the paragraph and use it to give me some clues. So countries whose citizens are happier on average report lower levels of hypertension in the population. Happier people are less likely to come down with a cold. Okay, I think I'm getting it here. What they're saying is that happiness helps people stay healthy. Okay, so in other words, your quality of life, your health, your ability to bounce back, your desire to live, that quality of life is related to happiness. Still, one more, this conceptual mélange, that means mixture, can be difficult to measure. So in other words, even though we can sort of define happiness using these 3 qualities, and we can say that you can actually see happiness by looking at people's quality of life, you can't really measure it. It's not like you could say, oh, here's a happiness thermometer. Let me put this in your mouth and look at your temperature, right? Okay, let's stop here so that I can show you the next step when you're writing a summary paragraph. So what I do is for each paragraph, I'm going to add a comment. And in my own words, I'm going to put the main idea into the comment. So I'm going to click on new comment over here. And I'm going to say, okay, so let me remember here. Happiness is slippery. It's got a lot of meanings and it's precise, stable definition. I'm just going to say that what he's really saying is happiness is hard to define, right? Because remember that in summary, you're taking away some of the explanations, the illustrations, and you're just reducing it down to the key points. So the first key point is really happiness is hard to define. The second one, which is really this whole sentence, right? If we look at this, we say that psychologists and economists, so I think we can keep those terms because we're not going to say some indirect way of talking about a psychologist. So psychologist, whoops, sorry, and sorry, I think that should be a lowercase c. Sometimes I forget what's a proper noun and what's not. Psychologists and economists think happiness has 3 elements. Being satisfied, feeling fulfilled, let's say, having good feelings, and not having bad feelings. Okay, so once again, what I've done is I've just taken this main idea and I have put it into my own words, keeping some terms like psychologists and economists because there aren't really synonyms for that, but then trying to begin to explain what these words are saying into my own language. Notice also that in general, I'm trying to use clear and direct language, not big fancy words, because you don't want to get your reader all tangled up with your 10-point words in a summary. They're just trying to get the main idea, right? It does exist. It relates directly to objective measures of people's lives. So remember that this was this idea that people who are happy tend to be healthier and more satisfied with their lives. So I would say, let's see, let me look back here. Happiness does exist. It relates directly to objectives. So people can see proof of happiness in the say, I want to say quality of life, but that's sort of what they said, in the health and well-being of people. So in this case, I've looked back at some clues and said that we've talked about health and we've also talked about people not wanting to be suicide, right? So I'm going to call that well-being. So we have a lot of people here. We might want to change that down the line, but this is the basic idea of that next paragraph. The third one, still this conceptual mélange can be difficult to measure. This is an example of a beautiful sentence, but not really a clear and direct sentence, right? So what the author is really saying is happiness is hard to measure. I think we're going to keep the word measure. Let's see, could we think of another word? Happiness is hard to measure. You could say maybe or assess, or I think measure might be the best. Sometimes you have to use the author's words, okay? And if you want to really be careful, you could put the word in quotation marks to make clear, look, this is the term that the author's using. I can't think of a different way to say it, so I'm going to quote it, okay? So as you go through the essay, what you're going to do is keep writing these little paraphrases, these little mini summaries of the key points of each paragraph. So the next thing you would want to do is, well, let's do a couple more actually, because I wanted to point out some other strategies that that I did. Okay, so in this next one, during an experiment in the 1980s, people who found a dime on top of a Xerox machine before responding to a happiness survey reported a much higher sense of satisfaction with life than those who didn't. This is actually more like an illustration, right? So this might not be details that I need to put in, but it is trying to show me something, which is like something really random and small could actually make you feel happier immediately after that thing happens. So another place where a person might put their main idea is actually at the end of the paragraph, right? So what I did was I looked down, oh, look, another study. Let me skip on down. People often give a substantially different answer to the same question about lifetime happiness if it is asked again 1 month later. So all of this paragraph, and I'm just going to pull on the first sentence to add my meaning, is that people's sense of happiness changes based on small things, right? Like you get a chocolate bar, all of a sudden you're like, generally my life's been pretty good, right? Your chocolate bar falls on the ground and you don't get to eat it and you think, my life sucks, right? So we let little things influence our assessment of how we feel. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do once you've done this for all the paragraphs, right, would be to start writing your summary paragraph. So let me pull up another document and let me show you how to write the first sentence of a summary paragraph. So this sentence has a really clear formula. First of all, you hit tab to indent, and your formula is in title, and then you're going to give author. So this is where you put the author name, and then you're going to have a verb, and then you're going to have the most basic main idea of the entire article, okay? So in this case, you would begin your summary, indent, in what happiness is, comma, Eduardo Porter, and I'm going to say argues because that's always one that you can fall back on, that happiness is hard to measure, but has some specific qualities. So I'm basing this on the fact that when we looked at it, right, at least from what we've read so far, that's what he's saying. It's slippery, but it's there, right? And then what you're going to do is take each of your key points and put them into your summary. So happiness is hard to define. Pull it on over here, boop, and stick it in, okay? Next sentence, copy it, paste it, okay? And next sentence, copy it, paste it, period. And last one so far, obviously you would do, oh, I've got two more, I'm sorry, I got carried away. Last one, obviously you would do all of these, right? But I'm just showing you briefly how to do them, okay? The last thing you would do is you would read through this and you would say, are there places where I'm repeating myself where I can tighten it up some more, right? So in What Happiness Is, Eduardo Porter argues that happiness is hard to measure but has some specific qualities. Well, look at this. I've basically already made this point in that previous sentence. So let me just pop that sentence right out. Psychologists and economists think happiness has 3 elements: feeling fulfilled, having good feelings, and not having bad feelings. People can see proof of happiness in the health and well-being of people. Happiness is hard to measure. People's sense of happiness changes based on small things. So when you write your summary, you would keep doing these steps, but I have to stop now because I'm running out of time. So I'm hoping that this is helpful. Reach out if you have any questions.